What's going on, family? How y'all doing? This is Sekou,
And this Baytash.
It's your boy Yusuf Sadiq.
and welcome to our podcast, Preliminary Thoughts. Oh, man. Yet another episode, yet another topic, yet another thing we have to discuss. Man, it's never ending, right?
Nope.
Doesn't end. Evil, doesn't end. It continues. And so as long as evil continues, we hope to, eradicate that evil to the best of our abilities.
Yes.
That's what it's all about. So, today's topic has to do with the gig economy. And some of you may know what the gig economy is, some of you may not. But it's okay. We're going to briefly break it down today. So, what is the gig economy? Right? Somebody might say, what is the gig economy? I hear this gig. What is the gig economy? So, according to a well-notable, website called Investopedia, it's a very good, finance website. I've used it a lot, throughout my studies in college. It gives a definition of what the gig economy is. And it says, what is a gig economy? In a gig economy, temporary, flexible jobs are commonplace, and companies tend to hire independent contractors and freelancers instead of full-time employees. Right? So companies tend to hire independent contractors and freelancers instead of full-time employees. A gig economy undermines the traditional economy of full-time workers who often focus on their career development. And, just to read two sentences, right? It says, the key takeaways of a gig economy. The gig economy is based on flexible, temporary, or freelance jobs, often involving connecting with clients or customers through an online platform. The gig economy can benefit workers, businesses, and consumers by making work more adaptable to the needs of the moment, and demand for flexible lifestyles. At the same time, the gig economy can have downsides due to the erosion of traditional economic relationships between workers, businesses, and clients. And this is the essence of what we're going to be talking about, right? So, it says, and just an ending of what the definition is, in a gig economy, large numbers of people work in part-time or temporary positions or as independent contractors. The result of a gig economy is cheaper, more efficient services such as Uber or Airbnb for those willing to use them. People who don't use technological services such as the internet may be left behind by the benefits of the gig economy. Cities tend to have the most highly developed services and are the most entrenched in the gig economy. Right? So this is the basic definition, of what the gig economy is. It's it's an economy where, temporary, flexible, on the go type of jobs are created and people are hired as independent contractors and freelancers, and they don't have full-time positions. Now, just to peek into the future, we all know we live in an evil world, as I began this segment, right? And this can have its benefits, but we all know that it can also have its downsides, right? And so just to name a few examples of, somebody might say, what exactly is it, right? Well, show me examples, Sekou, of what a gig is, right? It would be your normal ones, right? Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, Postmates, Fiverr, Upwork, Airbnb, Handy, etc., right? These are all freelance type of, entities, used in the gig economy, right? And so that's the definition of the gig economy. Now, obviously, the gig economy can have its benefits, right? You call in Uber, right? And somebody comes, picks you up, takes you from one destination to the next, right? You go on Fiverr, right? You need a logo to be done, right? Like you want your logo, you want a logo for your business. So you go on Fiverr or you go on Upwork, and they will, you'll have somebody who maybe graduated from a prestigious college in graphic design who will create a logo for you and your business, right? Let's say you want to fix something in your apartment, right? Instead of hiring a company, you hire a freelancer who will fix your faucet, right? Your tiles, right? For a set amount of price, right? And all of these people are freelancers, right? They're independent contractors. They don't have a traditional, way of working that America, has established, throughout the centuries, throughout the years. They don't have a normal 9 to 5, though they can make it a 9 to 5, right? But people who work in the gig economy are not seen as traditional workers as the definition presented. This is a very important part, right? They are seen as independent contractors. So these people are not entitled to certain protections that a normal person that a normal person who works a 9 to 5 would have, right? Or a normal person who's a part of a union would have, right? And I feel like this is very, very, very important. So this segues into, another part of this gig economy that's very ugly. Very, very ugly. And we're gonna get into it, right? There's an article from The Hill from last year, May. And by the way, just because this is from last year doesn't mean that it's still not relevant today, because it's literally not a year old. Mm-hmm. It's about 8 to 9 months old, which is fresh. You know what I'm saying? But The Hill, they wrote an article saying Uber and Lyft struggle to meet resurgent demand, right? So just as a bit of a context, the pandemic really made many people reconsider their lives. Many people who were driving Uber, driving Lyft, on Upwork, on Handy, on all of these gig, jobs, they reconsidered their lives, right? And so when the pandemic happened, many of them, obviously stood home, or they didn't do it, right? They filed unemployment and were collecting, funds from unemployment. So now 2021, things, and onward, things are starting to open up. Now they don't want to come back. And they're going to tell you exactly why they don't want to come back. Right? So, the article says, demand for ride-sharing services is beginning to pick back up as Americans get vaccinated against coronavirus. But many eager drivers are running into the same problem: a lack of drivers. Both Uber and Lyft have acknowledged the mismatch between demand for rides and supply of drivers, which is resulting in longer waits and higher fares for consumers, right? And so, the article goes on, and, there's a lack of drivers via Uber right now, Lyft, and, etc. And it's not only, this article talks about Uber and Lyft specifically, but the gig economy itself, they are struggling to find workers, because workers have now woken up to the idea that this is not an actual job, right? I have to work 16 hours a day in order to get the salary, or the equivalent of a salary, of someone who works a 9 to 5. And even that, I might get less. So I'm doing more to just catch up to society. People are realizing this. So now, the article goes in, and now the article starts to describe and tell the stories of some of these people who vow or who do not want to return back to the gig economy and who do not want to return back to Uber and Lyft. You know, the article continues. There's a guy who says, I'm not sure I'll ever feel comfortable going back because of the amount of pay. Let me repeat it again. I'm not sure I'll ever feel comfortable going back because of the amount of pay, said Daniel Russell, who drove for both Uber and Lyft in the San Francisco Bay Area before coronavirus. And San Francisco, the Bay Area, is one of the most expensive areas in the world. Forget about the United States. In the entire world, it's one of the most expensive places in the world. This man is saying he doesn't ever feel comfortable going back there because of the amount of pay. He doesn't have enough to survive in the Bay Area as a citizen of the United States of America. He doesn't have enough. He says it's not a safe feeling job. You don't have a lot of support from the company because the company does not deem you as a worker. They deem you as disposable, right? They deem you as an entity that is going to get them to their means. That's it. You're just a number on the docket. So he says it's not a safe feeling job. You don't have a lot of support from the company, he added, saying that the platforms had not done enough to crack down on riders who endanger drivers by not wearing masks. See that? Yusuf, you wanted to comment?
Yeah. So there's a lot in this article that I personally have experienced. So and it's very ironic that they're struggling with getting drivers like Uber and Lyft. Like that's very ironic. Given I want to say late 2018, right? In that time, like 2018, 2019, what Uber specifically was doing is they were getting rid of drivers left and right. You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, some customer, complains about you for whatever reason, boom, like you out. Like they will suspend your account, and then after that they won't open it. They won't let you, open it again. In April 2019, they actually stopped taking new drivers. Uber stopped taking new drivers. Like they just stopped. And like during the pandemic, I personally know a lot of drivers who said like, yo, like I'd rather take unemployment than work, for Uber. You know what I'm saying? Like during this time, because I'm gonna be on the streets, like, you know what I'm saying, like 10, 12 hours a day, just to make, this little amount of money. And yeah, and this in the article, one of the drivers said it's not a safe feeling job. You don't have a lot of support from the company, and that's completely true because y'all all know this, this concept where like the customer is always right. Consumer is king. You know what I'm saying? Caveat emptor. If you study business, exactly. You know what I'm saying? Like you've heard that, or that Latin phrase. So consumer is king, and that's their business model basically. So you have a lot of times where customers will complain about things, and they will actually lie about things to get out of paying. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of people have done this. They will lie to the company and say, oh, this driver did this, that, and the third, when that never happened. Just so, because what the company will do is they either give them another, or like their next ride for free, or they'll say, you know what, you don't gotta pay for this ride. And that's what a lot of the customers, when they lie to the company, that's what they're doing. They're looking for that free, you know what I'm saying, so they don't gotta pay for that ride. So they lie on the drivers, and then the drivers end up getting in trouble. And that's what actually got me kicked off of Uber at the end of 2018. Yeah, Yeah, so a customer lied on me and said that I was driving recklessly. Mind you, this is on Webster around 6 o'clock. Well, actually around 7, 8, like around that time. Smack dab
Traffic.
in the middle of rush hour. You know what I'm saying? This is 2018, so there's a whole bunch of cars everywhere. There's not even any room for me to drive reckless, right? This guy first he complained that because I was coming to him from the opposite I was coming to him from the opposite direction, and he had to cross the street to get into my car because there was no space for me to do a U-turn. He was mad about that. He got into the car. He complained about that. I said, yo, man, there's nothing I could do about this. You know what I'm saying? You see how traffic is, right? At the end of the ride, he ended up contacting Uber and told Uber I was driving recklessly. I didn't realize there was a problem with my account until the next day when I wanted to go to work. So I got up early in the morning after I prayed Fajr. I was about to get on the roads, get to work. Boom, I can't get into my Uber account. I called Uber. I tried to tell them, try to, resolve the issue. And till this day, I still can't get my Uber account back. Even when they're trying to say, oh, we're trying to bring old drivers back.
Look at that. Look at the hypocrisy.
You know what I'm saying? Mind you, I'm a 5-star driver with Lyft. Like,
that's ridiculous.
Yeah, so they won't give me my account back. So it ties into this whole thing with like consumer is king. That was 2 years ago. That was like 4 years ago. 3 years ago. Right? They're still doing it. They're still doing the same things. You know what I'm saying? You have times when, customers will hit up the company and be like, yo, this driver is doing this. And they'll just go with that. They don't care. They're like, they don't care their first instinct is to punish you first and then ask you what happened. You know what I'm saying? That's what they do. It's just insane. They don't really care about, the drivers. And the thing, and the reason why they do that is because you're expendable. That's the truth. Like, as someone who's participating in the gig economy to these companies, you are disposable, you are expendable. Because there are millions of other people that's willing to take your place.
That's it.
They have too many people. You know what I'm saying?
And so, as Yusuf mentioned, this is what we're dealing with. And so to continue into the article, it continues to give stories and, testimonials of old drivers, right? And, just to continue from what, the other man said about not feeling safe. It says, Anna, a driver in Los Angeles, another city that is amongst one of the most expensive cities in the world to live in. Anna, a driver in Los Angeles who preferred to use only her first name for fear of retribution. Let's stop here real quick. She refused to use her name for fear of retribution. From who? From the company? Because if it's and these companies, they boast about being the leaders of the world. How can a leader of the world be so pompous that mini little Anna, who's just a simple driver, is scared to use even her last name for fear of retribution? They call these people Uber. They consider themselves the leaders of the world. But nonetheless, she told The Hill that she is making more on unemployment than she would giving rides again. Oh my goodness. She's making more. She made more on unemployment than she would giving rides for Uber or Lyft. What?
And there's a lot of drivers who were going through that in specific, especially in 2020. Like, I know a lot of drivers who were working for Uber and Lyft at the time who said like, yo, I'm gonna just take unemployment, either because of the pay or like just like how Uber and Lyft like treats their their drivers. And it's very true. You know what I'm saying? Like, because like even if you do make a lot of money, once you factor in like all the expenses, all the things that you pay for, like like gas and tolls and your car's maintenance and and all these other things, like we actually make less than minimum wage. Once you like factor everything in, we actually make less than minimum wage.
Look at that. So it continues. It says, and Makila Edwards, who drove in the Oakland area, said that she's reflected on the costs she incurred while driving, like gas and oil and tire changes, and decided it's not worth it, especially if it means dealing with the public that may be a little bit hostile right now. Low pay has been a recurring concern for Uber and Lyft drivers, who say that the problems was exacerbated before the onset of the pandemic by there being too many drivers on the road. The article just continues, and it says, when I hear, it said incentives being offered by the rideshare companies to fix the current shortage could replicate that problem, experts warn. It's going to inspire people who have not driven before, who don't really understand how dangerous and precarious the work is. Vina Dubal, an associate professor at the University of California's Hastings College of Law, told The Hill. Their business model is to always have a glut or glut of drivers, because if you have a glut of drivers or glut, then you don't have to worry about matching supply with demand. You don't have to worry about matching supply with demand. Any risks and liabilities in business, like dips in demand, are really borne first and foremost by the workers themselves.
And to add on to that, that's why like many drivers, what I'm saying, myself included, during the times of, say, like after Christmas, right? After Christmas, after New Year specifically, there's typically there's dip in demand between for the rest of January and like early February, right? During that time, drivers struggle, bro. Like they struggle, especially like if you're living, week by week based off like especially if your budget like completely fits into how much you make in the week. A lot of drivers like they get to a point where like they're behind on their bills and things like that of that nature because of that dip in demand. A fall in demand, it doesn't really affect the company. It affects the drivers.
Say that again, bro.
And
say
that's
that
just
again.
what it is.
The fall in what? The fall
like
in
if there's a fall in demand, right? If there's less demand, it doesn't really affect the company. It affects the drivers.
Boom.
Because again, like not only are we making less money, even when things are quote unquote regular or normal, you look at, and this is like judging by like a lot of times when I talk with customers, right, in the car when we're driving, and they ask me like how much what I make on this ride, and like typically I calculate how much I'm going to make on a specific ride because I know like what the rate is based on the time and the rate for time and mileage is, and typically I know like I know an estimate of how much I'll make on any ride, right? And when you tell these customers like, yo, I'm gonna be making this amount of money on this ride, that's always met with surprise. It's like, yo, you're gonna make less than half of the money I paid for this ride. That's crazy to me. Like, why does that happen? I'm like, that's just what it is.
Yeah, and the article, I'll just finish off the article with these last, it says, when I hear these incentives to get back on the road, It's like Lucy and the football. One driver who preferred to remain anonymous told The Hill. All of these people are afraid to even speak out. What does that say about a company? Right? He said, I actually had to go on food stamps before the pandemic began because I was making so little. This was completely due to the number of drivers that were flooding the road.
And you see that's it says a lot about the company, but it also says a lot about the economy that we're in now and the situations that, you know, working and poor class people are facing. So, yeah, people are afraid to lose their jobs, but, you know, we're also faced with the issue of like being able, the struggle to even get like traditional jobs, which is why people are holding on so hard to these like very temporary jobs. Yeah.
And for all of you who don't know, all of us that are, you know, in the gig economy, and, you know, and for those, especially those who are struggling within the gig economy, you can thank Barack Obama.
Absolutely.
You can thank Barack Obama. He's the one who actually, like, before, these gig economy jobs didn't actually count as jobs. Barack Obama, after he was paid by these companies, after they gave him money, he decided to say, okay, we're gonna switch around all the labor laws. We're gonna actually consider these as employment.
Yep.
You know, so everybody, another reason why I completely despise that coon. You know what I'm saying? Like, everybody, y'all can thank Barack Obama.
Absolutely.
Barack Obama.
Oh my God. So it says, you know, this guy's on food stamps, you know, prior to the pandemic. This is an Uber or Lyft driver on food stamps to survive, right? It says spokespeople for Uber and Lyft touted drivers' median earnings in response to questions about these concerns. Uber drivers in major metro areas are making between $22 to $37 per hour before expenses. The spokespeople said, while Lyft drivers in the company's top 25 markets were making more than $30 per hour, and this is before expenses. And, you know, the article just continues, you know, to describe, you know, the sentiment of these Uber drivers and why is it that they're not going back. You know, there's another article I read, just like 2 sentences from it. It says, you know, from CNBC. This is July 4th, 2021. This is actually after this article that I just read from The Hill. It says why many Uber and Lyft drivers aren't coming back. You know, it says after a dramatic decline in traveling this past year, people are moving again. Yet despite offering cash incentives, rideshare giants Uber and Lyft are still struggling to bring drivers back to full speed, leading to longer wait times for customers and soaring prices. And just as a quick tidbit, I bear witness that, you know, during this time in July of 2021, they're absolutely right. I was paying $30 to $40 for one ride via Uber. I swear to God. $30 to $40 for one ride. In a week, I could spend over $100 on Ubers. And I don't have a car. I needed to get around. So, you know, the article just, you know, just really goes into depth. You know, it says Uber and Lyft said they thought the supply and demand problems would see recovery in the third quarter, which started in July 1st. However, if demand continues to outpace supply, it could pressure the rideshare companies to make more fundamental changes to cater to drivers. Uber, for example, is considering funding education and career-building programs, according to the Wall Street Journal. Lyft is also exploring ways to reduce drivers' expenses, according to the report published on Friday. But here's where it gets nasty. It says, but many drivers have gotten a taste of what working outside of the gig economy is like. Moore said she knows former drivers who have since gotten office jobs or switched to driving semi-trucks with no intention of coming back. Some gig workers have become increasingly frustrated with how the rideshare giants pay out, especially as surge pricing continues. Uber drivers, and this is a Twitter thread from Gig Workers Rising, right? Because they don't have a union, right? They're anti-union, absolutely anti-union. They don't want to, they don't care about their workers. They don't care about them. They're just a dollar on the they're just a number on the docket. So this Twitter thread says Uber drivers are pissed off and it shows. Surge pricing isn't convincing drivers to get back on the road because workers are done with Uber's games. The demand for drivers is simple. Return the fare multiplier and full trip information. Until then, delete Uber. And so, one last thing I want to read, it says the Washington Post reported last month that despite the high rates passengers are paying, drivers aren't getting the cut. Drivers are not getting the cut. And drivers have continued to call out the company, saying it's increasingly difficult to make a living on the apps, especially when compared with the early days of the company. He says, when I started driving, I was guaranteed 80% of the fare, Moore said. If that's where we were right now, you would see a different equation on the road. Drivers are seeing 20, 30, 40% of the fare at times. And so this is horrible. This is absolutely horrible. And we're going to segue. Yusuf mentioned that, he works for Uber, right? We
Lyft.
have... Yeah,
Lyft.
go ahead.
Lyft.
Lyft, sorry.
Yeah.
Let me correct myself. He works for Lyft because, Uber decided Yusuf, our brother here, is disposable. And off for one complaint, he's gone. Bye. He's just a number on the docket. We're going to get another one to replace him. And that's what they did, right? They did it to our very own brother here. Yusuf, here, was able to, describe to us what happens in Lyft. And we'll give you the floor, bro.
You know what's crazy? When you look at, and like most of us, we don't really like have time, or we don't want to even like look at, what they call the way bill for each ride, which is basically the breakdown of, how much you made on the ride and, how much they made and everything. Sometimes when you click on the ride information, right, they will show you how much you made, the mileage and the time, and based on that, how much you made. But if you click on the way bill, they would show you everything, right? How much the customer paid, how much Lyft took from that payment, how much they gave you, and how much was paid in taxes on that ride. The crazy thing is, we're paying taxes on things that's already taxed.
What?
Yeah. Like, we're paying taxes on rides that have already been taxed.
Lord. I don't even know what to say to that. Like, this is unprecedented. We've just never seen this before. And so, Yusuf, I want to ask you, just two questions, right? The first question is, as a Lyft driver, as someone who works in the gig economy, how many hours do you work? Because look, before you even comment, I work for a media agency, regular 9 to 5, right? I work 40 hours a week. When it's busy season, I work maybe 50, right? Maybe 60, right? But normally I work 40 hours. I have a 401k, you know what I'm saying? I have all of the benefits, you know what I'm saying? I have paid time off, 35 days every year, right? Yeah, more or less, right? 35 to 40 days, right? So I have all of those benefits. Now, Yusuf, describe to me how many hours you work and what benefits Lyft provides you.
Listen, man.
Oh, Lord. Oh, man.
We don't get no benefits. We don't have no we don't have any medical care or anything like that. All right, we don't have any benefits. We don't have any like medical care. They don't help us. You know what I'm saying? Like maintenance, none of that. Like no 401k, no dental care, none of that. We don't have none of that. But as far as like how much I work, well, TLC, that's the Taxi and Limousine Commission. They have laws in place. Like we're not allowed to. It's against the law to work more than 6 days a week. and it's against the law to work more than 10 hours a day. But here's what actually happens. For me personally, due to circumstance, like I work like until, for the most part, when I work, at the minimum I work 10 hours a day. But for the most part, like I work like 12 hours, you know what I'm saying? Like, so when you're on these apps, right, what they do is when you exceed the limit of the legal, you know, amount of time you're supposed to work, they automatically take you off the app, right? So for me, for the most part, I end up working until like I end up spending like 12 hours online, you know what I'm saying? And you know, they end up kicking me off the app. You know, that happens to me a lot. And trust me, if I like had, you know, if I were allowed to work more, most of the times, like I would work more. You know,
Because you don't. Is it because you don't like? Why is that?
Well, that's because like with the money I'm making, you know what I'm saying, I can only like be able to. I can't save at all. You know what I'm saying? Like there's, you know, I can only be able to meet my basic needs, and you know, and my expenses for, you know, to work. So that's what that is. You know what I'm saying? So for the most part, I work like 6 days a week, you know, 12 hours a day. So that's pretty much 72 hours in a week.
So,
Well,
yeah,
I don't always work that much, but like for
course.
the most part, you know,
that's how.
that's how it is.
And the most important part to mention quickly is that Yusuf doesn't have a choice but to do this, right? Somebody could, yes, he does have a choice. He could, look, this is his circumstance. This is what he's doing. He doesn't have a choice but to do this. And keep in mind, Yusuf lives in the most, not one of, he lives in the most expensive city in the world. So,
New York City, baby.
you know what I'm saying? So, and he lives in the poor. Thank you, Betash. Thank you.
Welcome
He lives
to the X.
in the poorest congressional district in the United States of America.
Yo, what's up, Ricky Torres?
You know what I'm saying? AOC. You feel me? Oh my goodness, man. So, you know, and Yusuf, my second and last question, you know, before we segue into our next part. You mentioned taxes. Oh Lord. I don't think this is headed towards a good direction. I'm just saying. You mentioned taxes. So you said they tax on the taxes. So I can imagine what the taxes are. Can you please tell me what's your gross versus, you know, net income, you know, the expenses and everything?
All right,
Please tell us, please.
All right, so to clarify one thing, right? They will tax the customer, as in like when you pay for the ride, you like the money you paying, like it includes taxes. But then when it's tax season, we get taxed as well. So one ride is getting taxed twice. I don't know how they do it. Like, I don't know what's going on there, whether like they cutting the taxes in half. Oh, drivers pay this and, you know, the consumers pay that, or like, I don't know, right? But that's what's going on. So when it comes to gross income versus expenses, oh Lord. All right, so on the service level, right? On the service level, if you look at how much money I made, particularly on the service level, you'll see, like, if you look at how much money I made, you'll say, oh, he's middle class. You know what I'm saying? Like, I made almost 70,000, like approximately $70,000, right? On the service level, if I'm like working, let's say if I'm working like some kind of office job or like, and I'm making $70,000 a year, oh my Lord, I'm chilling. You know what I'm saying? Like, y'all catch me like, you know what I'm saying, like taking trips and all that. You feel what I'm saying?
I get you. We get that.
But that's actually not what's happening. Like, so it's much better for drivers who own their cars, because they don't have to pay rent, you know, on the cars that they own. And that's another consequence of, you know, New York City, our New York City government, because what they did in 2018 was they stopped allowing people to buy TLC license plates. And in New York City, you cannot drive, a taxi or a cab without having a TLC license plate. You can't do. It just does not work. You can't do that. So when they did that, they forced a lot of people to rent cars. You know what I'm saying? Like now, like there are people who are renting, license plates, just license plates, and putting it on their car. But for the most part, people are renting cars. So once you add up all of my expenses for the year, my rent, gas, tolls, and mind you, I'm not even counting, how much like I paid like on my my phone bill. Like I'm not, cause like I need internet to work, and that's a common expense that drivers put on their taxes and write off because they need it to work. But I'm not even gonna count that. Once I put all my taxes, like all my expenses, Lyft platform fees and tolls, gas, my car's rent. Once I add all that together, I make less than minimum wage. Like
You said what?
It's less than minimum wage. It's somewhere around like the 20 approximately like around the 20,000 range. And like if you living in the Bronx, that's really nothing. You know what I'm saying? Like if you live in New York City, that's nothing.
Is it that below the median net income that you always mention?
Yeah,
31,000. How much was it? 31 or 33?
So $17,731. That is the median income for this Congressional District 15 of the Bronx. Hey, Richie Torres, what's up, man?
What's up, Richie?
You know what I'm saying?
What's up?
Per household is $31,063. So it's around, it's not, they're not too far from each other. It's around that,
that bracket.
Yeah, that area.
There you have it. This is a crisis, and this is a sad moment for humanity. The fact that somebody can be working 12 hours a day, 5-6 days in a week, make a gross income of 70,000, but when you account for expenses, it boils down to 22 to 20. It boils down basically to 20,000 range, which means he's paying more for his expenses than he's actually making. In which civilization has this ever been? Has this ever existed? In which civilization? How does that even make sense?
Welcome to the cannibal nation, people.
Welcome.
And the slavery capital of the North.
Yes, sir.
So, this is where we're at. I'm gonna now we're gonna segue to our last part, where Betash is gonna provide us, with some intricacies regarding this whole Uber, Lyft, and the gig economy. So
I actually sat with Yusuf before we conducted kind of like a kind of practice for me for a research project where I interviewed him briefly about this. So I was kind of privy to some of the information he was going to give. But again, like it's daunting. You think about it and you're like, how could you make so much in gross and take home so little after tax, given the economy we're living in, how hard it is to find work, to maintain work with jobs that really can just fire you for no reason at all, so, and given the economy that we're in, like, it's hard enough to find a job, to keep a job, especially with, most of these, like, unless you're working in food service, which is fine, and even jobs like that. I think at pretty much every level, it's understood that jobs are able to fire you at will, with very little reason for it. So when you think of all these factors, it's just troubling. But also understanding the technology. You know, in the first episode of this show, we talked about technology, surveillance, capitalism, and stuff. And surveillance is even embedded into Uber, into Lyft, into, and I'm pretty sure, services like Airbnb and Postmates and things like that. I did a 15-page, just basic research paper about Uber, the gig economy, and how it negatively affects the lives of African Americans. And in that, I was able to touch on some things. I mean, I've been writing about it a little bit more since then. And Uber and all of these jobs, they're problematic not only because of the wealth inequality that they reproduce. The gig economy itself has been reproducing the very same social system that we've been living in for a long time, one that is based in white supremacy and anti-blackness. Mm-hmm. And so on the face of it, these jobs come out of a more, I guess, neoliberal or, kind of new age, supposedly race neutral age, which of course none of the above is true. None. But it reproduces the same system, and it's meant to reproduce the same system because we're still in that same system. And just because we're heading into a new technological age, which really, when you look at it, is not very new. It's actually not. It's, in a sense, some philosophers would say we're still living in the 20th century. I believe it was Fisher. Forgot his first name. I'll get it for another episode. Gotcha. But this philosopher, his last name Fisher, was actually saying that living in the 21st century, I'm paraphrasing him, but living in the 21st century is basically just the 20th century on a high-def screen. Not much has really changed. We're still kind of stuck in that 20th century. And so that's kind of something I feel like I want us to explore to at another time. But, Yusuf and Sekou, you brought up great points. I mean, Obama is so connected to this. The fact that he, was able to now transform these Uber, for instance, who he's very much personally connected to make these jobs actual jobs now, completely changes what we know of as labor. And I mean, what I would argue is that it's just one more move in many, many moves in constructing what others have called a house of certainty. Michel Foucault, I think he mentioned house of certainty in one of his books. And that's where I got the inspiration for the title of an essay that I was sort of using his, part of his theory in. And it's that all we see now with these politicians and with laws and society at large is it's all being filtered through the digital. And if the more and more things are filtered through the digital, the more that control and power change, the more that information changes. Yes. That essay, I focused on how politicians are slowly, gradually allowing these digital changes to happen at the government level, through law and through policy and bills and things like that. But then the essay also focused on the digital transformation of communication and transportation. And so, of course, part of transportation is Uber. And if these companies continue to have monopolies, then they start to gain a lot more power in many different ways, not just in transportation, because in looking up a lot of information that's pretty much easily acceptable now about Uber for a long time, and I think even now, Uber doesn't even make a profit to some degree or largely. And so, we can, and at another time, we could really go into more detail about that, because we're kind of just trying to touch on things right now here in this episode. We're going to extrapolate more later or soon. But if a company like Uber, is not making profit, but they continue to have all this influence and power, then it just makes you sort of think like, well, what is the point? What is it that they're actually trying to do? So we don't really have the answers to that, but this is kind of connected to my thesis paper that I'm doing for my master's degree. And one of the books I was reading to sort of get information on it is actually by an anthropologist named Alex Rosenblatt, and she wrote a book about Uber. And in the introduction, she says, quote, "The promise of free gold is perhaps a fitting symbol for the gap between hype and reality in Uberland. A culture of shaky and insecure work in precarious times shapes the dynamics of driving for Uber, even though drivers do not individually perceive their employment as being precarious. As a near geriatric migratory driver, Freddie illustrates the quote-unquote fool's gold of Uber's rhetoric. Contrary to the company's marketing, he isn't sharing his spare asset and time with his drivers. He is working hard to make ends meet. Uber claims drivers can earn upwards of $90,000 per year doing ride-hail work, but Freddie's situation is a far cry from the picture of middle-class comfort promoted by the company. Uber rose to prominence as an employer by providing the masses with low barrier to entry employment opportunities. With little more than a car and a background check, anybody could be on the road driving as much or as little as he or she wanted. At its core, Uber does one thing really well. It organizes work for drivers and rides for passengers through a smartphone app. When it comes to marketing, Uber paints itself as the whole package for would-be drivers, pulling off a clever double speak. On one hand, it promises drivers freedom, flexibility, and independence. It tells them that they are entrepreneurs who can, quote, be their own boss. For legal purposes, Uber classifies them as independent contractors, meaning they are largely excluded from the employment and labor law protections to which employees are entitled, end quote. This is, of course, what Sekou and Yusuf have already explained. So the scholar is now giving a little bit more detail into that. And so, we're going to repeat a little bit here, but I thought it was important to sort of read this section.
Very important.
So Rosenblatt continues, yet on the other hand, Uber leverages significant control over how drivers behave on the job. Rather than supervising its hundreds of thousands of drivers with human supervisors, the company has built a ride-hail platform on a system of algorithms that serves as a virtual, quote, automated manager, end quote. She continues, freed from the necessity of layers of real bosses, algorithms manage drivers directly according to the rules that Uber lays out. But it's not as glamorous as it might sound at first. As entrepreneurs, drivers theoretically set their own hours, accept or decline passengers freely, set their pay rates, and build client lists. Some of that is true for Uber drivers. Drivers benefit from flexible hours, but Uber's promotional offers can effectively create shift work for drivers who need the money. The company may deactivate drivers who try to build their own client lists, and many drivers with whom I broach this subject say that they don't even bother trying because they feel safer knowing that they are covered by Uber's insurance policy, which offers $1 million in auto liability insurance per accident if one occurs between the time a driver accepts a trip and the trip's completion. They are penalized if they decline passengers, but Uber doesn't actually give them the information they need to assess whether a ride is profitable in advance. And Uber perennially and unilaterally changes their pay rates, usually by cutting them. Drivers are supposedly free and independent, but Uber's rules, enforced by their algorithmic managers, significantly limits the opportunities for entrepreneurial decision-making available to them. Drivers have noticed the tension between the promise of freedom and the reality of invasive algorithmic management. In fact, this tension is the basis of legal claims that drivers should not be classified as independent contractors. confirming what our brothers have said.
Exactly.
Alex continues. One of the fascinating aspects of Uber's approach is that according to the company, its drivers are not workers at all. They are consumers of Uber's technology services, just as passengers are. In 2013, a group of drivers and lawyers filed a class action misclassification lawsuit alleging that Uber was not justified in classifying drivers as independent contractors. They argued that Uber treats drivers like employees. In January 2015, court hearings of the case, Uber's lawyers explained that the company's drivers are actually customers of its software. Quoting, fundamentally, the commercial relationship between these drivers and transportation providers and Uber is one where they are our customer, where we license to them our software, and we receive a fee for doing that, end quote. Alex continues by saying, if we follow this logic to its natural conclusion, the company doesn't have any worker problems, despite mounting lawsuits, protests, and conflicts with drivers across the country.
All right, this book is completely spot on because, first off, where she talks about, we don't know whether or not a ride is profitable, that's completely true because for the most part, we don't know where we're taking you until we actually pick you up. Or at the very least until we arrive, at the pickup location. So for even to even know like that, like we have to, press on arrive, and then, look into like choose to like even look into the the ride information to see where we're going. You know what I'm saying? But even then, for the most part, we don't have time to look at that. So we don't know whether or not a ride is profitable until we actually pick up, the customer. And, when it comes to the pay, in most cities and in most counties, what happens is there's a base rate. So no matter how much, like how small it is, like, this, like you're getting this much. You know what I'm saying? So it starts at this. Like this is the bare minimum and then they build off of that. So anything, any minute or any mile is like added, like how much you make per mile, per minute, whatever the case may be, adds on to the base rate. In New York City, the base rate is 0. There is no base rate. There's no base rate in New York City. So, sure, for shorter rides, you make basically the same. Like let's say if the ride is like 5 minutes and a mile, for Lyft at least, you're gonna make like $5.47. Like for all those short rides that are like less than a mile, you know what I'm saying? Like you're gonna make $5.47. But that's not what the base rate is. Mm-hmm. For like, so there is no, in New York City there is no base rate, and like and I figured this out when on a day when I was driving from New Jersey Airport, right? For a ride that I spent an hour on, I think it was an hour and 30 minutes I was on the road. Like that was the ride time, right? 17-mile ride between the New Jersey Airport to Brooklyn. I made like $40, and that $40, the 20 was for tolls that I paid. So in all reality, I made like $20 on that ride. Like, don't make sense.
Ridiculous.
Right, and so you see that it connects to all the other things you were saying. It's not profitable. It's exploiting people. It's continuing, whether it's Uber, even Lyft. When I was doing research, it was specifically on Uber. But this is a reflection of all of the gig economy, we can probably safely say. I mean, obviously, we can look into different apps. We can see how they work. We can see if they differ in the levels of exploitation. But this new digital marketplace, as scholars are calling it, it's not looking good. This reproduction of the same social system is only going to continue to exploit people and also exploit them based on race, because as all of us, we experience everyday life, privilege or the lack thereof. We have different access to the economy based on our race. And so that exploitation, that business model, that social model is just being reproduced. It's being reproduced by Uber, and it's being reproduced in this new supposedly new digital age. The same people, the same ideologies, the same, market.
Same economy, same everything.
Yeah. So there's no reason to think anything about this new technology is going to change anything. I mean, as we can see when Yusuf was talking about the customer that got him permanently kicked off of Uber, regardless of the race of that person, we can see that these jobs create an environment where racism can thrive. Uber encourages their drivers to have snacks and gum and chargers in the car to increase, tips and good ratings, because obviously their employment is based on their rating scale. But you see, as the scholar Alex Rosenblatt, as she confirms, and as my research with other sources had confirmed from my paper, there's no humans involved in this. There's no human management. So the algorithm is just going based off of data, off of numbers, and customers can clearly, as Yusuf said, take advantage of how the system is set up. Nothing can go wrong on the ride, and they'll just claim that something went wrong, get their money back. The driver doesn't get paid, regardless of how far he goes, how far she goes. If this person doesn't like black people, they can falsely claim that this driver did something to them. They can make any type of false claim that could land this person maybe even in jail. So, customers, especially white people or anyone that's anti-black, can put black drivers at risk, make them lose their jobs. And this can happen from one app to the next to the next. And that means that once you're locked out, most likely you might not be able to get back in. And in an economy that's already not hiring black people, is racist against black people, who keeps black people, particularly African Americans, freedmen who are descendants of chattel slavery,
Who built the country.
who built this country, who continue to be locked out of the economy. This technology further allows that process to happen. As white people or anyone who has anything against black people, or anyone that's out to get black people, or just have fun terrorizing people racially, has the ability to get African Americans and other black citizens locked out of these jobs, likely permanently, minimizing their options about where they can go next, while all of them and all of us are, all basically, scrambling to survive. But depending on your race, that has much more extreme outcomes based on where your lineage is connected to, what race you belong to. So all of this is, and then of course a company that, as Alex Rosenblatt says, Uber self-identifies as a technology company, not a transportation company.
Look at that.
So, when you kind of start connecting all these dots, and we can see the problems that are already occurring, and the fact that surveillance is attached to these technologies, we kind of start painting a picture of like some very troubling things. And obviously that's still kind of like vague, and we can go more into detail, but we already hit the hour mark, and obviously there's way more to talk on with this subject, many different facets of just Uber alone. But this digital marketplace is vast, and a lot of these apps are working the same way. And the people in power, the politicians, they're all pushing for it.
Yep.
They're all pushing for it while also not making it possible for us to get increased minimum wage. As we know, $15 is not a livable wage. We're not getting the help that we need. And the people that are, racially vulnerable to this economy in this country, it's even worse.
Yes.
So we need to be fighting for digital bills of rights for citizens. We need to be fighting for, a change in this new labor market, which is just horrible. It's being promoted to us one way, but it's clearly doing something else. And so going forward, we need to obviously talk more in detail about these consequences and what's happening, and whatever changes may or may not be happening within these apps and this gig economy. But this is where a lot of focus must be, because it's already affecting so many of us, given the actual economy and the condition that it's in. But we're also moving into a realm of digital money, digital space, and this connects right to it, whether it's easy to see or not. So obviously we're going to need to sort of expound on this very soon. But
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Betash, thank you for that breakdown. Yusuf, you as well. This concludes our episode here. We hope you guys benefited. We'll be putting all of the articles and links via our bio. We hope you guys enjoyed. Until next episode, peace.